In a more widely documented case, 6 men were charged with raping 2 white nurses. The black soldiers were represented by 1 white officer. None of them made a statement, and none admitted they were guilty.
The alleged victim said that she had sex with 2, and then at one point she said 3 of the 6 men, so which meant that the 3 others didn't have any kind of sexual contact. But MacArthur reviewed the case and upheld it, and the 6 men were executed. They were all hanged.
Dearest Mother and Daddy, how have you been since I last heard from you? I know this is shocking for you. Well, Mother, this is going to hurt you. I'm in serious trouble, and I have to pay the penalty. Some time ago, I was court-martialed. I was tried under 3 articles of war: mutiny, rape, and attempted rape. Dear Eleanor, I know it is hard for you all to believe it. We will be hanged tomorrow morning. You all know just how far a colored man's words go. His word is no good. So you all read this letter. I ask you not to worry, because I'm going to meet my Lord, who is in the land. I always loved you from the first time I met you, and I shall still love you after I'm gone. I won't say goodbye. I'll only say so long, because I'm sorry I can't help anymore. Take care of Mom. Your son, Arthur Thomas Brown, one who thought there was no one like you, Leroy.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Wednesday, March 30, 2022. So I have been told that audio segment from the documentary Black Soldier Blues, even in the midst of global mayhem, black male rapists. We played that segment and talked about that film way back in the archives. Important for lots of reasons, but reminded me very much of the content that we will discuss today. We just finished in the book club The Man in the High Castle, Philip K. Dick, and we got towards the end, and they used the term, Mr. Dick uses the term Tojo as a racial slur. I said, Tojo? What is that? Who's Tojo? Retired Firefighter helped me out. I said, oh, he was he was convicted, war criminal, one of the generals for the Japanese army. Immediately, I flip to our guest for today's broadcast. I felt so embarrassed that I hadn't read his book already. I just flipped to the index to see, does he have Tojo in there? And I kind of did the one eye look, yes. If I had read this, I would have been in much better position. Easily one of the best books Gus has ever read. So informative, just wow. Amazing scholarship, and then white supremacy is in the title and on every page of the book, basically. Wow. Super privileged to have him on the program again. Joining us, he is the professor. He holds the Moores Professorship of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston. Has written a plethora of books, probably 2 or 3 since this morning. Back with us once again, Dr. Gerald Horne. Dr. Horne, are you with us, sir?
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure to have you on the program. We'll try to be efficient with your time. Before we get to race war, just for any of our listeners, this might be their first time hearing about you and the work that you do. Anything that you would like to share with folks briefly before we get started?
Oh, no, I thought that introduction you did was sufficient.
Outstanding. The 2005 publication, Race War. One of the best books that I've ever read. So glad that we can have you on the program. Just, I guess, can you give listeners an idea? Because I was impressed immediately. Many things to be impressed about, but the research. You went to 5 continents to research this work?
Well, what happened, I got a fellowship at the Hong Kong University, which is now the Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, a former British colony. And Hong Kong was the centerpiece of that book. But, of course, I went to Australia, to India, Singapore, Europe, North America. There's some research in Africa in that book as well. And the book tells a story about the racial implications of the rise of Japan. And it also inferentially sheds light on why, thus far, the only use of atomic weapons has been on Japan in August 1945 at the hands of the United States of America, which some consider one of the most profound episodes of mass murder in world history, and insofar as tens of thousands of people were incinerated instantaneously when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And in order to understand that mass murder, you have to understand what Japan's modus operandi was up until August 1945. In other words, the Japanese elite had noticed that a small percentage of humanity, basically centered in the North Atlantic, in Western Europe, and in North America, were dominating the world, and were doing it on the basis of a kind of hocus pocus that they were, quote, white, unquote, and therefore were superior. Obviously, this did not go down very well by the hundreds of millions of people who were not so defined. And so Japan decided that it would get in the head of that parade. Interestingly enough, I spend quite a bit of time in that book talking about the reaction of Black Americans to this Japanese maneuver. You also should know that I have a companion volume to this book, Race War, that deals almost exclusively with the Black American reaction. That book is called Facing the Rising Sun, African Americans, Japan, and the Rise of Afro-Asian Solidarity. It only came out a couple of years ago. And some of your alert listeners might recognize that phrase, Facing the Rising Sun. Of course, it comes from the so-called Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. And interestingly enough, during the era of Japan's rise, which is the first 4.5 decades of the 20th century, that phrase, Facing the Rising Sun, was oftentimes invoked by Black Americans because, of course, the rising sun is the symbol of Japan. In any case, in that book, Facing the Rising Sun, and also in Race War, if I'm not mistaken, I talk about what happens in Black communities in November 1942 when you had Black Americans drilling in uniforms with weapons, expecting a Japanese invasion of North America in which they would join the Japanese side in order to rout the rulers in Washington and on Wall Street. What happens, of course, is that they're rolled up, they're detained, many of them Black nationalists. In fact, you may know that the man we know as Elijah Muhammad was imprisoned during World War II because of his reluctance to fight against Imperial Japan. I start the book Facing the Rising Sun with an episode from Malcolm X's autobiography. You may recall that in the autobiography, he talks about going to a draft board, and he doesn't want to get drafted. And so he says that if he's drafted, he's going to turn his weapons on the officers in the U.S. military and likely defect to the Tokyo side. So what's remarkable about this story is that how it's been buried to a degree, which I understand because it raises very disturbing questions. It raises questions about the ultimate loyalties and allegiances of people of African descent. I think for the rulers of this country who like to sleep well at night, they prefer to think that despite all the violence inflicted upon us and our ancestors and the depredations that have been inflicted upon us and our ancestors, that we somehow, I guess, are chumps, that we remain loyal to the bloodstained stars and stripes. But history belies that easy nostrum, and certainly the research that I do in Race War and Facing the Rising Sun should put a final nail in that coffin of ridiculousness.
Indeed. Full title, Race War, White Supremacy, and the Japanese Attack on the British Empire. Let's see, before, in fact, even with what you just said about Minister Malcolm X, I was reminded of that passage in the autobiography about where he said, I would get my rifle and point it back at you all, which that point pops up in your book repeatedly. You start out at the very beginning and you say, if I had been alive, draft age at that time, 1941, I would have fought for the Allies. I would not have been like Malcolm X, would have signed up for the Allies. Why so?
That's a very good question. I would say that ultimately I would have made that decision because most likely I would have been influenced by the position of the organized left, which took the position globally that Japan's alliance with Nazi Germany ultimately did not bode well for black people in the United States of America. However, I think a close or alert reader who reads my book may see that in some sense I contradict that point of view, because I say that if World War II had gone in a different direction, that is to say, if the United States and its allies had lost, there was a very strong likelihood that there would have been an ultimate showdown between Tokyo and Berlin. Just like we saw during World War II that Moscow was allied with Washington, and World War II had barely ended in 1945 before that showdown between Washington and Moscow ensued. In fact, that showdown between Moscow and Washington is unfolding as we speak. In fact, we might be headed for the ultimate or the penultimate chapter of that decades-long struggle. So the question is not an easy one to answer, but that is my answer.
Right on, right on. You and the chapter titles, just so much information. So the chapter title, and you can share some of the information about the significance, to be of pure European descent. You talk about Rudyard Kipling pops up, and this is just to give, as you said, some of this has been buried, so I don't think people get the typical notion of how front and center white supremacy racism was for everyone involved with this conflict, white or non-white, anywhere in the world. So in this chapter of pure European descent, this is on page 22, you write, Rudyard Kipling, the poet laureate of British colonialism, confirms this allegation. I hated the Chinaman before, he began angrily. I hated him doubly as I choked for breath in his seething streets. His demented passion reaching a disturbing crescendo, he concluded, now I understand why the civilized European of Irish extraction kills the Chinaman in America. It is justifiable to kill him. It would be quite right to wipe the city of Canton off the face of the earth and to exterminate all the people who ran away from the shelling. The Chinamen ought not to count. These were not simply inflamed rhetorical outbursts. John Sutcliffe Whitehead, who served with the military in Hong Kong, noted pointedly that the white officer type always was armed. Why? Well, if there was a bloke in the marketplace and he was stealing, or something like that, the usual cry in the marketplace was, "Stop, thief! Stop, thief!" With that, he'd fire one shot in the air. If that had no avail upon the thief, bang! The next one went into him and they'd pick up the body. With no residual regret, he concluded, such was summary justice in Hong Kong at the time, with British soldiers as police, judge, jury, and executioner. Your thoughts, Dr. Horne?
Well, I think that vignette illustrates a number of points. Certainly, black people in North America are quite accustomed to an officer of the law acting as judge, jury, and executioner. That has been our sorry plight for decades, if not centuries, to this very day. But I feel compelled to issue a few footnotes. I was paying attention to that Black Soldier Blues excerpt that you were playing before I came on, and it reminded me of something that I think your audience should be made aware of if they're not already. You might have noted that just the other day, after decades of struggle, the U.S. President, Joseph R. Biden, signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal crime after a struggle that was launched decades ago. And with Emmett Till, and of course your listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with Emmett Till, the black youth from Chicago who goes south to Mississippi in the mid-1950s and gets involved in some sort of scrape with Euro-Americans and winds up being dragged from his bed and lynched. Well, there have been a number of documentary movies, as you know, about Emmett Till. And I understand why they omit this salient fact I'm about to bring to your attention. Salient fact being that one of the ways that they identified Emmett Till, apparently, was that he had a ring that belonged to his father. I think his father's name was Louis Till, who was executed during World War II, not unlike those vignettes from Black Soldier Blues, supposedly for sexual molestation of a European woman, which I found very ironic since, as you know, Emmett Till was lynched because of this confrontation with a European American woman. I understand why the filmmakers might not include that because it doesn't comport with the kind of narrative arc they're trying to construct. But I always found that to be an intriguing parallel. That's footnote number one. Footnote number two, back to the story of race war. What's interesting, as I've spent time in Hong Kong and these other sites, India, Australia, Singapore, etc., Japan, of course, is that what happened at the beginning of the 20th century is, this is relevant to what's going on today with regard to Russia, is that London, the British Empire, which saw itself as the leading power on planet Earth, did not necessarily feel that it controlled the continent of Europe. Because if you look at your map, for centuries now, and certainly to this very day, Russia has been the most populous European nation, about twice the size and population of the Federal Republic of Germany today. Most of the resources on the European continent, or in Russia, gold, oil, palladium for planes, etc. And so what happens is that London finances Japan to attack Russia, and Japan wins. And this is 1904 to 1905, and this is hailed by Du Bois, Ho Chi Minh of Vietnam, Sun Yat-sen of China, Nehru of India, as being a turning point in the struggle against white supremacy, which it was. But what it also illustrates, it reminds me of the story from Vietnam. I'm sure you recall the Vietnam War, when there was this rather paradoxical, ironic trope where the United States said that it had to destroy a village in order to save it, which obviously makes no sense. But in some ways, London felt it had to inflict damage on white supremacy by funding Japan in order to save it. But that didn't work out because by 1941, 1942, it was Japan that delivered the knockout blow to the British Empire by seizing Hong Kong, 1941, Singapore, 1942, two of the major cash cows of the British Empire, as those rather unfortunate comments by Rudyard Kipling that you quoted tended to suggest. He was reacting so strongly because he was reacting to China trying to break the iron grasp of London. And what follows is the atomic bombing of Japan, which I noted a moment or two ago in August 1945, and then with the United States supplanting London, the British Empire, post-1945, with the question today being, is the United States about to be supplanted? That's a live issue as we speak.
Dr. Gerald Horne, his book Race War, Context of White Supremacy. You already mentioned Minister Malcolm X, his teacher Elijah Muhammad, the chapter names in this one alone. Asiatic Black Man with a question mark. Right. you already discussed but Mr. Malcolm, as you stated in his autobiography, hey, you give me that gun, I will point it back at you. And many other people being impressed, black people in the States, with what Japan did against Russia, white people, and then on into World War II. Specifically, you're right, this is on page 53, and this, in fact, it reminded me of the book Race Matters, the FBI secret file on Black America from 1960 to 1971, even though this is a little bit later, but Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly talks extensively about, hey, in fact, he goes back to World War I with Marcus Garvey, who's mentioned in your book. He says, hey, we treat black people like garbage. Their loyalties are suspect, which is exactly what you say in your book more eloquently. You write, Washington was not idly sitting by as these potentially seditious acts were unfolding. To the contrary, surveillance of Negroes was escalated, and the reports agents were filing were not encouraging. In October 1919, for example, came the disturbing story from Los Angeles that Japan is planning trouble with Mexico against the United States, and it is reported that within the next 12 months, they are planning war in California. The Japs, that's said so many times in this book, my goodness, the Japs are enlisting and promising certain things to the colored people on the coast if they will join in with Japan and Mexico when the trouble is begun here in California. This information comes through a certain colored man now in this city from Gary, Indiana. He has been displaying a revolver. He said that he had it to shoot up any fresh white fellows within the event anything was started in this city at any time. This was corroborated by a Negro bootblack in Los Angeles who said that the Japanese had been making overtures to the Negroes to side with them, and that in a year or so they would take California, and that when they did, the Negroes would be treated right. I'm just want to add one more paragraph before I get your commentary. I'm skipping that a little bit because it's not just black people in the States. It's black people all over the world too. Their loyalties might be suspect to the British Crown, the U.S., white people in general. So globally, this is a little bit later on 106, you add, the Negro response to Germany should be seen as more of a comment on London than on Berlin. Decades earlier, Negroes had been told that if they fought Germany in the war to end all wars, they would benefit. Instead, colonialism continued, falling heavily upon those of African descent. Hence, as London was under heavy assault from Berlin as the Pacific War approached, the colonial secretary was told that there was insistent anti-British talk brewing in Jamaica. They were just protesting, I thought, a couple days ago. A colony that supplied numerous black migrants to Harlem. Jamaicans had a hard time understanding why it was unacceptable for Berlin to deprive European nations of sovereignty, but acceptable for London to do the same in the Caribbean. This alarmed the Jamaican left, which moved a supportive pro-London resolution noting that many of the inhabitants of Jamaica were apparently inclined to be Axis sympathizers. Neighboring Haiti, too, had long admired Japan. Black people a global fifth column, Dr. Horne?
Well, vis-a-vis white supremacy, yes. Let me add a few points. One, this concept of the Asiatic Black Man, which you still hear invoked from time to time from so-called conscious rappers, quote unquote. I'm not sure that they understand the roots of that, which arises in the 1930s when Japan is making this effort to attract black people to its column so that it could then help to destroy Euro-American imperialism. And this arises in the 1930s, particularly when Japan is courting Ethiopia. I guess you could say along with Liberia, which is kind of a neo-colony to U.S. imperialism, but Ethiopia being the independent African nation almost by itself. And of course, that helps to attract those who come to call themselves Rastafarians in Jamaica because of their fascination with Ethiopia. But the point is that Japan was proposing in the 1930s that there be a merger between the royal families of Japan and Ethiopia. Now, those familiar with European history know that oftentimes royal families in various countries merge. I mean, for example, Prince Philip, who just died, the spouse of the current monarch, Queen Elizabeth, his roots, if I'm not mistaken, were in Greece, just as Queen Elizabeth's roots were in Germany, for example, because of these mergers of royal families. And so that struck a chord with many black people, because if you even talk about marrying a woman defined as white in North America in the 1930s, you might be lynched. And so that was one of the ploys that Japan was using to attract these black Americans. Then with regard to that quote from Los Angeles, either in my book Race War, or certainly in my book Black and Brown, African Americans in the Mexican Revolution, 1910 to 1920, I talk about the Plan de San Diego, or the Plan of San Diego, whereby Washington thought that Japan was going to arm black and indigenous people in the borderlands, such as Texas, for example, and have them take over and have the United States basically balkanized with black and a black independent republic established on this soil in North America and a Native American independent republic established on this soil. Obviously, this caused quite a bit of hysteria in Washington, needless to say. And then with regard to the point about how this Japanese appeal was not just towards black people in North America, you mentioned Jamaica and Haiti and the Caribbean. Well, also in South Africa. South Africa was really in a pickle in the 1940s, because on the one hand, it was trying to impose this primitive white supremacy, which in some ways outstripped its counterpart in North America. And on the other hand, the city of Durban faces the Indian Ocean. There are reports of Japanese submarines cruising off the coast of South Africa. South Africa was unsure what to do because Japan was making an appeal to these Africans who were suffering under the lash of white supremacy. And so South Africa was really up a tree, so to speak. And the sighs of relief that were emitted in August 1945 when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were perhaps most evident in Pretoria, South Africa.
Wow. Context of White Supremacy, Dr. Gerald Horne. I'm going a little bit out of order just because Dr. Horne, now he just said South Africa was in a pickle. Okay, so I'm reading Dr. Horne. Dr. Horne's, when you read his phenomenal scholarship, I can only say, glance through the footnotes. So when we had Dr. Horne on last year, we discussed his book, The Bittersweet Science. Excellent book. Excellent. We hit that footnote like, what are you talking about? This here thing with Larry Holmes. We have to go and get the footnote for Ishmael Reed. Oh my God, I'm stunned. What is going on? I come to this here book and I'm glancing through the footnotes, lots of footnotes, so well researched, 5 continents. I look through the footnotes and I stumble on Double Victory, Mr. Takaki's book. Now, he just said pickle. Delectable Negro for Cows listeners. This is on page 170, one of the footnotes he uses in the book. This is Double Victory. It reads, but out here, I've already gathered the feeling that the Japanese are looked upon as something inhuman and squirmy, like some people feel about cockroaches or mice. Remember Pearl Harbor? Keep 'em dying, declared a Marine motto. Admiral William Housley gave his men a direct order. Kill Japs. Kill Japs. Kill more Japs. A Marine captain declared, we kill yellow rats. If we don't kill 'em, we won't be around for any peace. So we hate and kill and live. And he ordered his men to go into battle against the Japanese. An American admiral urged his men to go and get some more monkey meat. Some American soldiers followed such orders literally. They sadistically collected battlefield trophies, scalps, skulls, bones, and ears. A Marine at Guadalcanal bragged, I'm going to bring back some Jap ears, pickled. Robert Leckman recalled that he didn't collect ears of dead Japanese, but he knew some others did. We had been fed tales of these yellow thugs, subhumans, with teeth that resembled fangs. If 100,000 Japs were killed, so much the better. 200,000, even better. The gold teeth of corpses became collector's items. One soldier excitedly boasted, they say the Japs have a lot of gold teeth. I'm going to make myself a necklace. Marine Eugene B. Sledge watched a fellow soldier use his knife to hammer gold teeth from the mouth of a wounded Japanese soldier who could not move his arms. Comparing the Pacific War with the European War, historian John Dower wrote, it is a virtually inconceivable that teeth, ears, and skulls could have been collected from German or Italian war dead and publicized in the Anglo-American countries without provoking an uproar. And in this, we have yet another inkling of the racial dimensions of the war. The taking of war trophies, especially scalps, was a legacy of an earlier racialized war, the winning of the West. When I was a young boy, a soldier said we always played cowboys and Indians, and when I landed on Guadalcanal, that's what I felt like. I was playing a game. It was not real, even though I knew it was real. Marines frequently saw the Japanese attackers as whooping like a bunch of wild Indians. Jungle combat against the Japanese was often characterized as Indian fighting, and the perimeter outside American military control was called Indian country. Commenting on Japanese fighting skills, Colonel Milton A. Hill described the Japs as good at infiltration to as good as Indians ever were. Rephrasing an old frontier adage, Admiral Housley declared, the only good Jap is a Jap who's been dead 6 months. You should check Dr. Horne's footnotes when you read his works. Wow. Dr. Horne, this is from Double Victory, even though he does quote from this in Race War. Dr. Horne?
Well, yeah, footnotes are important because they not only point the alert reader to where you might want to substantiate that I got this quotation or fact correct, but also history, it's like Lego blocks. It's 50 years from now, assuming that humanity still survives, there might be another scholar who wants to tackle a similar subject. And therefore, they can look at my footnotes and try to build upon what I did at the beginning of the 21st century. Also, you mentioned Pearl Harbor. For those who might have missed that history class, that takes place on December 7th, 1941, when Japan attacks the U.S. base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. They catch Uncle Sam with his pants down, and thousands of U.S. nationals are killed. A black hero by the name of Dory Miller emerges. He was in the Navy. Like most black men in the Navy at that time, he had a third-class position, but supposedly he grabbed an anti-aircraft gun and started shooting down Japanese planes, and he became sort of a folk hero. Also, the existence of Dory Miller was used to try to woo black Americans away from Tokyo, who, as I noted, Tokyo had been wooing black Americans for some time. Which brings me to a point I might have abbreviated in the previous segment, which is this notion of the Asiatic Black Man. Many of the black nationalists, they were not necessarily inspired by Africa, Ethiopia aside, namely the Rastafarians, which I've already referenced. And so they were inspired by Japan, however. And so many of them, that's where the concept of Asiatic Black Man comes from. They were identifying with Japan, Asiatic Black Man, and that's where it comes from. With regard to dehumanization, a lot of what you were quoting was dealing with how the Euro-American elite oftentimes found it necessary to dehumanize those who they were confronting. For example, indigenous people, Native Americans in the first instance, when they invaded this continent and began to sweep the Native Americans out from their land, of course, part of the rationale was that these Native Americans were actually part of the human family. And I'm sure I don't have to tell your listeners about this notion that Africans were not necessarily part of the human family, which gave a rationalization and justification for enslaving Africans. And then, with regard to that point further, note that on the U.S. Pacific coast, from Seattle to San Diego, you had Japanese American communities that were swept aside, were interned in the interior of the United States of America, or in the interior of California, for example. And what's striking, and your listeners, I'm sure, are wondering about this as I speak, well, why wasn't the German American community from Bangor, Maine to Key West, Florida, interned likewise? Particularly since we know that Berlin had sent across the Atlantic their soldiers to infiltrate so-called white communities because, of course, they could easily, quote, pass, unquote. And that aspect of the war, as much as any, it seems to me, helps to illustrate the pernicious nature of white supremacy during World War II. And I should say further that it's not coincidental, it's not accidental that in the wake of World War II, particularly in the wake of the Pacific War, that you see this agonizing retreat from the more horrible aspects of Jim Crow, because Washington came to realize that Jim Crow was a national security issue, as evidenced by the fact that Tokyo had made these appeals to black Americans, and some, as I noted, were willing to join a Japanese invasion of North America when beckoned. And in the epical Brown versus Board of Education U.S. Supreme Court decision of 1954, wherein the highest court in the land says that, you know what, Jim Crow is actually constitutional. The court also notes pointedly that this is not just a decision based upon the reading of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's also based upon a reading of national security. Of course, by that time, the United States was involved in another conflict, this time the Cold War with the Soviet Union, with many black Americans like Paul Robeson, for example, being attracted to Moscow's banner. And so it was felt that if black people were treated with a tad more sympathy, that they would be less prone, less likely to defect to the banner of whatever antagonist Washington was facing. And I think that fundamental lesson oftentimes has been lost in the 21st century because many of our intellectuals and organizations do not seem to recognize that if you're really sincerely interested in seeing an erosion of white supremacy and getting this boot off of our neck, you really need to think globally. You really need to think internationally. Otherwise, it seems to me you're just bathing in naivete.
I think somebody did write a book called Artist as Revolutionary. That's a whole biography on Paul. Oh, that was you. We read that in the book club. Fantastic work as well. I'm just following Dr. Horne's lead now, setting them up, knocking them down. So he said they caught the U.S. with their pants down at Pearl Harbor. And I'm tracking metaphors, so common theme between the Bittersweet Science. There were many things, many things that stood out as important in that text you should definitely read. But wow, Larry Holmes, Proposition by Howard Cosell. What? You got to read the footnotes on that one. Like, what? So we come to this one. Now we've moved ahead in Race War. So now we're in the chapter Race Reversed, Gender Transformed. This is page 148. Dr. Horne writes, the Japanese, he said, were exceptionally cunning or perceptive in selecting an effeminate, spineless Royal Army Service Corps officer, one Major Boone, to act as liaison officer between the camp and them. Major Boone, seen by many of the intern as a collaborator, had also, in their eyes, lost a prized possession, his manliness. Louis Bush described him as an effeminate-looking individual, well-shaved, powdered and perfumed and well-uniformed, with a slender waist which seemed to indicate that he used corsets. They gave him a nickname, Queenie. Many of the men felt the loss of their masculinity deeply and performed what they felt in various ways. Louis Bush was the master of ceremonies at an event featuring a beauty chorus of handsome young men dressed as girls with Japanese captors as the audience. Our girls were a tremendous hit, he thought. They looked quite fascinating. In the penultimate scene, the lead girl threw his bouquet to a Japanese officer. We do not know whether either blushed. Tongue-in-cheek, Dr. Horne, I'm skipping down just a little bit to 149. This kind of performance was not peculiar to Hong Kong or unique to the British, though they were the ones who raised it to the highest art, their male prisoners taking female parts, attractive young men who could act like attractive young women. They drew wolf whistles. Emmett Till, are you serious? They drew wolf whistles, stage door Johnnies, even Japanese guards bringing gifts, cigarettes, candy, perfumed soap. In such an intensely homosocial environment, homosexuality flourished. In one camp, something like 25 homosexual couples were getting counseling from one of the American doctors. There were variations on this theme. Captain Crum Chatty was charged before the war in Hong Kong with homosexual offenses with a Chinese boy. disgrace, dismissal, and imprisonment followed. But he was released to fight the Japanese and displayed outstanding courage and leadership in the battle for Stanley. Wow. Can you talk about, because you have lots of this, but I mean, loss of white manhood in World War II? Did I miss that in Patton? Where is that talked about?
Well, I'm sure you realize, and many of your listeners realize, that generally speaking, when an invader oppresses a group, oftentimes there is sexual molestation of not only the women, but the men. With regard to the former, it reminds me of this movie that came out some years ago, which actually I recommend. It's very interesting. Paradise Road with Kate Blanchett and Glenn Close. It takes place in a Japanese prisoner of war camp in Indonesia. And what's interesting is that most of these folks are living large, these Europeans. They're living large in Singapore. And the movie begins with these British people partying like it's 1939. Of course, this is 1942. And they hear a boom. And they look around, people look at each other, they keep partying. Then it's another louder boom. And then these Japanese guys invade the party and say, you people are all under detention. And the movie unfolds from there. And what's interesting, to get to the point, is that many of these European women decide that just to, and by their own admission, just to get access to hot water and a decent meal, to become mistresses of Japanese military men. And as I was watching that, it reminded me of the compromises that many oppressed women have to make in order to survive. I get to not to put too fine a point on it, but I guess you could say they become de facto prostitutes. Now, with regard to the men, that's less discussed, perhaps because men tend to write the histories, and it's a very sensitive point. But I felt compelled to include that because I think that we need a similar history with regard to how men of African descent have been treated by oppressors. Now, there's a recent University of Georgia Press book. I think it's called Reading Rufus. It's not that long. It supposedly is about that subject I've just sketched, about the oppression or the sexual oppression of black men under slavery. But for a future researcher, I won't make an editorial judgment about that book, but I will point it in your direction. But for a future researcher, and I've told graduate students this for years, it wouldn't be that hard to write a book on that subject. All you have to do is look at court cases, because one of the things about court cases in the United States is that they're very well indexed and very well organized. You only need a couple of key words and voila, a number of court cases would emerge, and that would be your resource base. And then you could just follow those court cases into newspapers, into memoir literature, into biographies, etc. And I think it's a subject that needs further exploration, because I think it would shed crucial light on the question of black masculinity. And speaking of black masculinity and trying to be ultra trendy, it might even shine light on what some have interpreted as toxic masculinity, as reflected in the last 48 to 72 hours with the slap heard around the world in Los Angeles.
So timely, Dr. Gerald Horne, and Context of White Supremacy. We've been here for 13 years. What have we been doing for 13 years? One of those programs was with Thomas A. Foster Rethinking Rufus, Sexual Violations
okay. Yeah,
of
so you
Enslaved
talked
Men.
to him. Good.
Yes, indeed. On our assignment, sir. In fact, let me pull one more footnote, so stay on the same page. Just pull down, in Australia, as in the United States, one of the key obsessions that sustained the continued existence of segregation was the hoary chestnut that white women could only be partners of white men, with Negroes, men and women alike, viewed as hypersexual and dangerously and compellingly attractive. At the same time, there was thought to be a high incidence of homosexuality among black American troops stationed in Australia, which both ratified and challenged these more traditional notions. So this is footnote 131. What's footnote 131? The reception of black American servicemen in Australia during World War II, the resilience of white Australia. So scroll down. What is this here footnote? So it reads, as soon as he spoke, we knew he came. Oh, let me make sure I get it correctly. As soon as various official sources confirm these allegations, although they do not provide substantive. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was right the first time. As soon as he spoke, he knew he came from the Deep South, where the Ku Klux Klan operates. We told him the reports we heard about shootings in the showground and that people reporting it feared that the Negro soldiers were being shot. He did not deny it, but said this disciplinary action was necessary to prevent the Negroes becoming uppish or uppity, I think was the term he used. Various official sources confirm these allegations, although they do not provide substantive details. The Queensland State Publicity Center, obeying instructions from the Federal Department of Information on November 9, 1943, ordered that no broadcast of shootings of Negro soldiers in Sydney by U.S. provosts be issued. Furthermore, it was deemed that reference to racial problems in Southwest Pacific area, riot stories, death of Japanese POWs, or any reference to Negro, black, colored soldiers were officially banned. Despite extensive research conducted both in Australia and in the United States, no more information could be obtained about this particular shooting in Sydney. Interviews conducted with either prominent politically active citizens in various areas of Queensland revealed that they believed the U.S. military police or shore patrols had on various occasions shot black servicemen. Scrolling down just a minute. Oh, there it is. Make sure I get in my correct footnote. The homosexuality is commonly believed in southern states that there are licensed brothels in Queensland. This is not so, though the police insist that girls living in certain houses who are known to be prostitutes shall have regular examinations. In Brisbane, there are some 20 of these houses, and in Townsville, 2 or 3. The American forces have set up several such places with Australian girls for the use of Negro troops, much to the disgust of many civilians. General Patrick Hurley reported in the previous year that in Townsville, white and Negroes line up together in whorehouses where Negroes are accepted. However, a careful scrutiny of the police department records reveals that most prostitutes who catered for black Americans in Brisbane were Aborigines rather than Anglo-Australians. On the other hand, this procedure protected respectable white women from unwanted glances. One issue that did not elicit any public reaction was the high incidence of homosexuality among black American troops stationed in Australia. Certainly, any open discussion of the subject of homosexuality was socially unacceptable. Yet, in light of the obsessive preoccupation with blacks supposedly contaminating white women, homosexuality could surely have been regarded as a means by which decent Australian women, white, could remain inviolate. Check the footnotes with Dr. Horne's work. This is the reception of black American servicemen in Australia during World War II. What are your thoughts about this? They said high incidence of homosexuality amongst the black troops that were stationed there.
Well, when you were reading that, I was thinking of a number of things. First thing I thought of, I'm doing research on a book on the Black Panther Party right now. And so just today I was reading the words of their founder, Huey P. Newton, and he's talking about homosexuality in prison, which of course was quite common. And he even speaks about it amongst prison guards, which is something I was not altogether familiar with. And as you may know, the Black Panther Party was probably the first organization, per Huey, in fact, to try to form coalitions. This is in the early 70s, late 60s, with militant gay rights groups. And this was seen as somewhat contrary to what was perceived to be the Black Panther image of being hyper-masculine, etc. And that's something I'm going to have to deal with in this book forthcoming that I have not written yet, by the way. And then as you were reading those words, I was thinking of the impact that the Black Americans had in Australia and in New Zealand to a certain degree. Because it's now established. First of all, as you probably know, the indigenous people of New Zealand, the Maoris, and the people across the Tasman in Australia, who we call Aboriginal, many of them could easily pass for Black American. I mean, if basketball fans in your audience might be familiar with the Brooklyn Nets and their effective point guard, Patty Mills, who many probably think is a Black American, given his surname, but actually he's Australian Aboriginal, for example. And that Patty Mills is somewhat an updated version of the impact that these Black American soldiers had down under in the continent of Australia, in inspiring militancy, for example, amongst other trends.
Super important. When you mentioned Patty Mills, I thought you were going to say the Brooklyn Nets point guard Kyrie Irving, because he's also...
Well, actually, he's Australian too, you know. I mean, he was born in Australia. He was born in Australia, excuse me.
Right, that's...
Although he's a Black American.
He wears his Australian hat all the time, though. He does rap. Probably has dual citizenship. Let's see. I had one question about... I'll get that in. We had a listener who had a question as well. One quick question. You also do the Freedom Now radio broadcast, KPFK.
Oh, good.
And you recently had Dr. J. Russell Hawkins as a guest on the program, discussing his book, The Bible Told Them So, Southern Evangelicals Fight to Preserve White Supremacy. Now, that's rare to have two books, both with white supremacy in the title. When we had him, speaking what he just said, when you have individuals who are defeated and you end up having the females and even the males rethinking Rufus, who might be in a position of prostitution, Strom Thurmond's is a really prominent character in that book, The Bible Told Them So. And specifically, so many times, Dr. Hawkins talks about how white people were writing Senator, Governor Thurmond, we got to do something. We got these raping black males, you know, these Emmett Tills, they're going to rape our girls. We can't have them in school. He even had one passage where he said it could be a Negro bus driver who's going to put their daughter on a school bus with a Negro bus driver, and the sun isn't up. The sun isn't even up yet. And all of this, I said, Dr. Horne, that's great and everything, but you totally omit Strom Thurmond raped a 15-year-old in his house. He's 25. Like, you leave that out of your book entirely. And he says, well, I did know that he had a child with Carrie Butler, but I didn't know that she was 15, that this was child rape. And I said, Dr. Hawkins, doctor, you have a doctorate. You had editors on staff like, oh, he said, you know that he had, that he had sex with this black female, but you didn't know she was 15. Like, that is totally unacceptable, and particularly because this just continues the same racist legacy of covering up white rapists. We mentioned that Chinese boy, white rapists and child rapists, at that taking advantage of a 15-year-old black woman, female, even if she had been 55. How much agency would she have had to say no to a white man at that time in South Carolina or Alabama? Hey, even now, 2025, how much agency would she have to say no to a white man, Dylan Storm Roof or any other in South Carolina, but it was so many reasons. I said, man, this takes a book that does have a lot of constructive information. You leaving this out for any reason, whether you did it purposely, whether you did it because you didn't know, that is totally unacceptable and may be a deliberate act of racism. What do you think about him not including that information?
Well, so you interviewed him, I take it?
Yes, sir. About 2 weeks ago.
Oh, good. And so how did you know about Freedom Now on KPFK?
One of our listeners is a big rewind. Many of our listeners are big fans of your work, as they should be. So they listened to your segment over there, and they heard your interview with him. Like, wow, this sounds like such a great book. Like, this is amazing. Did you know about this book? That's how I heard about the segment that you did with him.
Yeah. Well, obviously, it's a, shall we say, euphemistically, a grievous omission. You know, I've done research at Clemson University in South Carolina, where they have this sort of, what's the term? It's not a museum, but it's this building constructed to honor one J. Strom Thurmond. And for listeners who may not be familiar, he was a leader of white supremacy from his perch in South Carolina. And so what's interesting is when you go in to that building, because they have archives, they have all these archives there, which of course are quite intriguing. I've used it for a number of projects, his archives. And they have a picture of him with his so-called white family. And then adjacent is a picture of what might be called his black daughter offspring, who is the product of that union that you made reference to. And it's a very curious assemblage, I must say. Let me also, since I have the microphone, that Freedom Now comes on KPFK, Los Angeles, kpfk.org on Saturdays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So check it out.
KPFK Freedom Now, Dr. Gerald Horne. That's where I heard his interview with Dr. Hawkins. Do you think that's important? You said it was I do not speak euphemistically about individuals classified as white. I don't have a doctorate. I don't have a staff, people that fund my work. And I knew Strom Thurmond raped the 15-year-old black female, child rape, as a white person, and you have a doctorate. You wrote a book on this, and you have editors. None of your editors looked at this and said, hey, you got all this talk about raping little white girls and child rape at that, and we can't get one line. Oh, yeah, he did actually rape a black child. The hypocrisy. I mean, do you think that's significant, him leaving that out? Like, that's major? Like, that's like, whoa. Like, editors, everyone is indicted for this?
Well, not only editors, but as you know, in this process, I think the book was published by Oxford, if I'm not mistaken, and you have anonymous readers, that is to say peers, peer review. That's how this business works. And so, well, yeah, that reminds me that you have peer review, and so perhaps you can indict the peers. There are usually at least two anonymous readers. But then when you get into this editorial process, as I oftentimes tell people who criticize my work, that, you know, it's not only my name that's on the cover, it's also, say, New York University's name is on the cover. I remember one book I published for New York University Press. They made me cut 300 pages.
Wow.
In the book. I mean, that's like another book, basically. And, you know, with these publishers, you go back and forth. And, you know, it's just like any other struggle. I mean, you win a few, you lose a few. And so with regard to J. Russell Hawkins, you interrogated him, so you have a better feel for that. But when I sense something like that, oftentimes I look at it through my lens and say maybe he had a struggle with the publisher. The publisher said, strike this for whatever reason. And he had won a few battles and decided to lose this one. So I don't know. Who knows?
He went with, he didn't know she was 15. He did know that she had a child with Carrie Butler, but he didn't know that she was 15, which none of that, in my view, exonerates no inclusion of that. Like I told them, in my view, this is an act of white supremacy racism. You leaving this information out because you didn't know about Carrie Butler, and it would include the editor. Like, whole lots of people should have red flag. And he said he's been doing interviews for a year. I was the only person who raised an issue with this. Like, wow. And I know it can't be I'm the only person that knows this. That's hogwash. This was all over the front page of the New York Times and LA Times, and they got her name on the statue, as he said, Carrie Butler. So apparently lots of folks don't have a problem with black children being sexually exploited. Just don't mention it. Did you have time?
Well, start with Thomas Jefferson.
That's what I said in the program. Sally Hemings. It's the exact same thing. She was a child. She was a teen. I said the exact same thing, doctor. It's institutional covering up for white child rapists, male and female, rethinking Rufus. Thomas A. Foster. Did you have time for one quick question from our listener before we let you enjoy the rest of your evening? Let's see.
Sure.
Caller at 2262. Did you have a question for Dr. Gerald Horne? You should be with us.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Thank you guys for taking my call, and thank you, Dr. Horne, for spending a little of your time with us. My question is, in your book, do you have accounts of white women engaging in acts of white supremacy racism?
Oh yeah. That book Race War came out almost 2 decades ago. I've written maybe 15 books since then, so I can't pluck out anything specific. But my interlocutors read the book. Do you recall anything from?
Oh yeah, if you give me, I highlighted the one towards the end where you talked about how some of the Chinese said that the white women were the worst. Oh, just give me 30 seconds and I'll. Let's see. Oh, bing! Didn't even need 30 seconds. Just as buses became the flashpoint for confrontations over racial segregation in the United States, in Hong Kong, the ferries did so. European women were charged with being key transmitters of bigoted ideas. Britain's worst ambassadors are the women, said one man bluntly. On the Star Ferry, he saw 2 British women sitting next to a Chinese man in European dress. They exclaimed in high dudgeon, "Is this a British ferry or not?" Then they walked off. Didn't they realize, he asked in reference to Tokyo, that the racial discrimination of former years paid sorry dividends in the long run? The British need to take stock of new conditions in this old world of ours. A white skin, he concluded in words that many found hard to accept, does not mean superiority. That's a pretty good one, right?
Yeah, you may want to interview Stephanie Jones Rogers at UC Berkeley. She wrote this book on white women slave owners in the United States South. The book is called They Were Her Property. It's published by Yale University Press. And even if you don't interview her, the caller might want to read that book if that's his subject. That is to say, white supremacy coming from Euro-American women.
Did I get your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call, sir, and thank you, Dr. Horne, for spending a little of your time with us. And yes, I'm definitely aware of the book, They Were Her Property. I have not read it yet, but I'm definitely intrigued. And thank you again for a little of your time. And that's all. Thank you.
For sure. Henry in Chicago is a big fan of your work as well. I see him listening in. I don't know if he had a question. I guess I'll check really quick. Henry in Chicago, did you have a quick question, or are you just listening in? I know he's a big fan of your work as well, sir.
Hello, gentlemen. Unfortunately, out of all of the Dr. Horne books that I've read, I have not read this one. So now that's another Dr. Horne book that I'm going to get. So, expect another royalty check from me, Dr. Horne. I need my life.
I appreciate it.
I don't know if these are the type of books that you get rich for. Like, you tend to get rich off of books like The Bell Curve, something like that. Have you made a lot of money off of Race War, Dr. Horne?
Oh, please. If I had to live on that, I'd be, to use the current phrase, unhoused.
One of the best books I have ever read. Just amazing scholarship. Thank you. Like I said, I wish I had read this book. I was like Henry in Chicago. I hadn't read this book. Then we read The Man in the High Castle, and I had no idea who Tojo was. If I had read this in advance, I'd have been smoking going into that one. But make up for it, better late than never. What is the Black Panther book going to be before we let you depart?
I've just started on this book, although it's taken over my life. And because it's such an interesting topic from my point of view. And I'm dealing with the Black Panther Party in Southern California, which was their strongest chapter. It was also where the most Panthers were killed, the most Panthers were incarcerated. So this will take a few years to produce, since I've just started.
Well, you certainly have enough material that we can read in the meantime, Facing the Rising Sun, amongst others. So we will not pout, but we will definitely be eagerly awaiting the latest installment. Incidentally, you mentioned the prison guards being involved in the rape of male prisoners and such. Alan Hornbloom, his book Acres of Skin, Human Experiments at Holmesburg Prison, talks about that as well. They were doing these experiments, and some of the black inmates, they would get cash, and he talks about in the book how that fueled a lot of the homosexual activity, because some of the inmates, they could stockpile their cash and use it to purchase like an inmate that they wanted in their cell or whatever. They could bribe the guards, and all the guards were involved, pick out who they wanted to have sex with. Just horrible all the way around. But the experiments were part of that, because it put so much cash in their hands that they had a lot more power to manipulate guards, everyone. Acres of Skin, Alan Hornbloom, 2-time guest on the Cows.
I'll check it out. I appreciate it.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Wednesday evening with us. Continue your just phenomenal scholarship, Dr. Horne. We'll be waiting on the next installment, sir.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
For sure. Take excellent care. We'll speak soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good evening. That was Dr. Gerald Horne. Fantastic book. Like, man, to be able to read, I guess, hopefully, people who listen to the Cows, like all the authors and such that we have on the program, like, you're able to read a book that's informative, and you're able to learn some things, inspires you to check the footnotes and what have you, should be like, wow, I've learned so much. That type of feeling. It's so well researched. Like, man, to visit, I don't know how many people read books where the author went to 5 different continents to research what they put together, but wow. Anywho, book club, that, like, wow, in so many different ways. Like, this is total advertisement for the book club. The only reason today's program happened is because of the book club. I didn't even enjoy The Man in the High Castle, mostly because the people who voted for us to read that book didn't participate. But it was constructive. That's how I read this here book. So the book, both bookends of the book club with S.E. Mae Washington Williams, her memoir, Dear Senator, continuing tomorrow, and the book club. So many people have said for years, it's hard for them to listen to the book club for whatever reason. They don't like listening to audio online, or it's difficult for them to pay attention. For a book, you might have to follow along with the book, be reading along to really extract all the information. But even if you read the books on your own, the C.O.W.S Book Club. Very informative. I think if you just pick like half of the books that we met, maybe even just pick 10, you would learn a lot, especially because we end up reading a lot of like nonfiction, memoirs and the like what we're reading right now. But I thought that was so important at the end. I had to get that question about Dr. J. Russell Hawkins. Egregious, like I'm not euphemistic with white people. This is a white man with a doctorate and all that. And for him to just say that he didn't know she was 15, no. Active white supremacy, racism. Like I said, there's so many. That's one thing since I've been able to visit the University of Washington's library a little bit. They have so many front page report, not just buried in the back of the paper, like front page of the New York Times, where they're talking about, oh, Carrie Butler was 15, Strom Thurmond is 23. You have people writing articles calling it that. What else can you call it? And I'm so glad Dr. Horne said that, Thomas Jefferson, because Gus T said that to Dr. Hawkins. This isn't just you as an individual. This is white people collectively do this. They lie and cover up all of this child rape that's been going on for decades right there in Rethinking Rufus. That's a lot of times we're not even talking about raping of black men. We're talking about raping black boys. That's in the archives. You can go back in J. Russell Hawkins, but that's why we're reading Essie Mae Washington Williams' memoir right now. And because we're reading that book, what does she start with? Same thing we heard at the beginning of this program, raping black males. Essie Mae Washington Williams' book starts with Zachariah Walker, black male who was lynched close to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right? Not way down south or whatever. She starts with that. I was going to get a autobiography on that book, which I did get, and I'm trying to see if we can get that off on the program. But while at the University of Washington Library, I discovered that they have a whole lynching section. Could have fooled me. And a whole lynching section just on the lynchings of black males. Delectable Negro. Get the teeth and everything that you heard me read. So I look at, it was so many books, and I didn't come to, let me hang out in the lynching section and see what books they got. That was not the reason why I was there. So I went to, to finish my assignment, but I did take pictures. So I took pictures. I posted some of them. When I was able to look at the pictures after I left the library, it was like, wow, I didn't even pay attention to some of these titles, like White Man's Heaven. What? One of the books that I didn't really get to pay attention to, At the Altar of Lynching. The lynching of Sam Hose. I didn't even know who Sam Hose was until I picked up this book written by a white man. He should be with us this coming, Sunday. That's April 3rd. Yeah, and at an irregular time. Sunday. I don't like moving the time of our program. I absolutely hate it. Confuses listeners and all the rest of it. Confuses Gus. However, the author of At the Altar of Lynching, a white man in his 90s, no less, Neely Fuller-esque, he said that the program, he's totally down for interview, but he said the program needed to be after 10 a.m. Eastern, before 4 p.m. Eastern, and it could not conflict with any of the scheduled times for the University of North Carolina or the Duke Blue Devils, Crystal Mangum, Duke lacrosse team, the Duke Blue Devils basketball team, any of their games. Gus T is not a basketball fan or sports fan in general, so I had to go pull up the NCAA schedule. And lo and behold, North Carolina and Duke are still alive in March Madness and all of that. So we had to pick a date and time, Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Pacific. Gus T really unhappy about that, like 11 a.m. for a broadcast time. 8 thumbs down. Anywho, at the altar of lynching, Dr. Matthews, white man, will be on the program, and in no conflict with Duke and North Carolina, who are actually playing each other at the Final Four. I'm sure he's giddy about that, or Dr. Matthews. He actually attended both universities, so he wins either way. Anywho, what can I say? The book that we talked about mostly today, Race War, phenomenal. I'll see if folks have any thoughts on what they heard from Dr. Horne, but wow. I would say to any of the folks who say that if you are not classified as black, you are a white man or white woman, you should read this book. I guess you could submit that things may have changed from now, but all of that, my president, what it is, it comes from China. That would tend to make me think that, yeah, that is not the case, that individuals who practice white supremacy racism, they don't think that way. That's not the way that they perceive whom is accepted, able to be on the white team, so to speak. They are much more discerning about who's a member. Let's see. The feminization I thought was really important as well. Especially white men, especially that's coming up now again, a loss of white manhood. They were saying so much about President Trump. That was his goal. That was his ambition, and white manhood and angry white men who feel like they're losing out in all of this. White people wearing dresses, pretending to be girls, not even women, girls, after losing to the Japanese. What does it mean to be white? I would love to hear Dr. Welsing's thoughts about. I wish I had read this earlier. That way I could have presented this. Like, what do you think about this? Did you know about this? Like, my goodness. The great equalizer, when that is not enough. Oh my goodness, what happens to the man? He's wearing a dress and pretending to be a girl, and for Japanese soldiers, no less. They even had one, speaking of Welsing moment, they even had a different soldier. He wasn't dressing up like a girl. He was acting like a dog. They said he would get on all fours. They called him Dog Man and bark. He bit a Japanese officer when he was interned. What in the world? Welsing moment, if nothing else, but what in the world? Amazing. Let's see. I'll check, see if folks have any comments here they would like to get in. Check my notes, make sure I can have other comments. So we'll be here tomorrow for the book club, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Essie Mae Washington Williams, Dear Senator, 3rd session. She just found out that she has a white father. Wow, the book is, I'm so glad that I picked this one. And the only reason we're reading this text is because of Dr. Hawkins' conduct on the program. If he'd had just one sentence, one paragraph in the Bible told them so about Essie Mae Washington Williams, Carrie Butler, maybe we would have been reading a different book. But he didn't. So that's what we're reading. Dear Senator, it's been amazing. We'll continue tomorrow. Remember, we'll continue tomorrow. We haven't even included any of the interviews that Essie Mae Washington Williams gave before she passed away. We'll start to hear from her directly tomorrow. That was deliberate. We had audio about other subject matter, but man, I'm so looking forward. I think I posted some of the videos that she's done. You can check online. She did quite a few interviews on major outlets, including 60 Minutes. But wow, it is fascinating to study the results, the product, if you will, of a tragic arrangement. Why are they called tragic arrangements? Whew. Very sad illustration. Word for the whole book could easily be confusion. Anyway, but that's tomorrow. Neutralizing Workplace Racism, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And Saturday, compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Sunday, irregular time. Dr. Matthews will be here. We'll talk about his book. I'll give out one quote, and then I'll check, see if folks have any thoughts. This is just, there's so many great quotes in the book, but this is one Dr. Horne included from Adam Clayton Powell, black congressman from Harlem, was of like mind as he saw it in the fall of 1942. The difference between Nazism and crackerocracy is very small. Crackerocracy is a pattern of race hatred. The late, great Adam Clayton Powell Sr., known for being able to drop a line or two. Crackerocracy. That is one Gus T will remember. It does seem like that's kind of maybe a little bit close to name calling, but wowzers. The late, great Adam Clayton Powell Sr. Let's see. Any of the folks who are with us, I'll see if they have any commentary they'd like to share, what they heard from the great Dr. Gerald Horne. Let's see. 2262 should be with us. I'll see if any other folks have thoughts, observations, what they heard. Any thoughts, or folks content? Might be content. If you don't have Race War in your library, you should, not just in your library, read it. It is a longer book, and it's kind of dense. If you are not like a World War II buff, Gus T is not, you might have to go a little bit slower. Take your time as you're learning the new information. Check that. That's all I can say is check the footnotes. You don't have to read every one. You don't have to go and, dig up every single book and report and magazine article and what have you that he lists, and you wouldn't be able to get all of them, because some of them, these are documents that he went to the library in Australia and other places, masterful scholarship. But just give a glance at the footnotes and see if any other books that are available might catch your eye. You might find something else that you want to read. It is fascinating material, especially if you have any confusion about so-called Asian people and where they rank, even so-called Asian people and even black people born outside the U.S. and how they function, how they're treated in the system of racism, white supremacy. Wow, amazing read. Let's see how many other folks who dialed in. So folks who dialed in, any thoughts, comments from what they heard? Dr. Gerald Horne.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings, Gus. Greetings, callers and listeners. The broadcast was very constructive. It reiterated and reemphasized that in the system of white supremacy, war is fun. To people who classify themselves as white, they have fun bashing in teeth, collecting trinkets in the form of golden human teeth. They have fun maiming non-white people. This is fun for them. More motivation for non-white people to be very serious about suspecting people who call themselves white, and motivation to want to produce a system of justice. Because to be amongst a group of people where war is fun is quite bizarre and very, very, very incorrect, and motivation to want to solve this problem ASAP. And I'm going to mute my line.
Urgency. I say that all the time. At the conclusion of every program, is not replace white supremacy with justice. It is replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible or immediately. But a sense of urgency. That's the reason why I included that, why I read that lengthy passage. It's not, I don't even know what the other motivation could be. It's not like there's anything cool about reading. That's not anything special in the system of white supremacy, although they do a phenomenal job, racist educators, of discouraging, obstructing many black scholars, young black students from reading and doing well at school. But that's why reading is more important than watching television. You can learn a lot about the system of white supremacy, racism. And did you hear that? Bragging. Who Who makes it a game? You had so many people saying that throughout the book and him quoting. Who makes that a game? Collecting, and to even specify, it's not fun. The rules of this game say that I don't get teeth from a dead chink, Jap. Oh, no, that's not fun. I get the teeth from a live Jap. Who does this? Who behaves like this? And it's bunches of these types of references. Like I read the longer passage, but I mean, it's these lines throughout the text. Let me see if I can find one of the other ones really quick. This is on about midway through Race War. Let's see. So this is on page 226, Race at War. Dr. Horne writes, Japan was aware of the cruelty with which its troops were treated, and, like Negro soldiers, it too connected this to white supremacy, his word, symbolizing the zenith of 20th century American barbarism. It reported is the grim Symbolizing the zenith of 20th century American barbarism, it reported is the grim picture of President Roosevelt at his huge desk in the White House, fondling a letter opener made from the forearm of a Japanese soldier. This was akin to the American brutality and atrocity as shown in their lynchings and other discriminations committed against innocent Negroes. Now they passed the lynching bill. Whoopee. This meant that the peoples living in East Asiatic countries will not be exempted from falling prey to American mob psychology and sacrificed upon the altar of American barbarism if the enemy should win the war. At the altar of lynching is the book for Sunday. Same topic all over the world. Dr. Horne emphasized that this is not a U.S. problem. This is not a South Africa problem. This is not a Japan problem. This is not a Germany problem. This is a global problem. The global system of white supremacy. And if you don't grasp that, everything else will only confuse you. White people working together to dominate the Negroes. You see this over and over. But lots of that having fun. And even that, so this is not some one-tooth, no-count, redneck white person, right? They said this is President Roosevelt chilling at the White House, fondling a letter opener made from the forearm of a Japanese soldier. Who thinks like that? Who behaves like that? And as he brags about that sort of conduct, and even the word fondle, talked about delectable Negro and all of that, the word fondle, stroke or caress lovingly, erotically. We've talked about this 13 years basically. Mutilating and all of this desecration of black bodies. There is a sexual component to that for individuals classified as white. You don't go and slice off Emmett Till's penis and genitals and put that in a jar, save it for 100 years. You don't do that without there being, I mean, why are you, and then to have that be a cultural practice that's repeated. You see the pattern. That's what Adam Clayton Powell said, a pattern of this behavior. Ask all the time what it means to be white. And in fact, that's going to come up in the book for Sunday at the altar of lynching. Is this what it means to be white? That you have fun and derive some sort of sexual gratification from the mutilation of black bodies, non-white bodies in total, it seems. Is that what it means to be white? That question, in fact, is posed early in the book at the altar of lynching, that we should be chatting it up Sunday, irregular time, early. Did any other folks, comments, thoughts that came to mind they wanted to share?
Yes, can I still be heard?
Yes, sir.
Then referring to the Japanese as the Indian, and calling the area they were decimating them in Indian country, that echoes back and is evident of just the tradition and the religions of white supremacy. How this is what they do. You know, even though the so-called Indian people are long gone in the manner that they're referring them to, they're still their mind, their racist mind is still where it was, I suspect, when the Yoruba got started with this race business. But I may be in error.
Absolutely. And that point is in the book consistently in terms of calling the Japs Indian. Now, I mean, in this book, do you mean like Indian in terms of folks next to Pakistan? Or I guess that didn't exist before World War II, but that's white people too. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean like the folks that you call Indian over here? Like, even like, who are you talking about for the white people that are saying, oh, this is Indian country, but they're talking about the so-called Japanese? Like that right there, like, it doesn't even matter. You're not white. You don't count. You're an Indian. But wait a minute, I'm Japanese. Shut up, Indian. Even they have in the book sometimes where they're calling so-called Asian people niggers. It doesn't matter. You're not white. You don't count. It's nothing to you. You should be, I'm snatching the teeth out of your mouth. It's nothing to you. You don't count for anything. Yes, black get back? Absolutely. But hey, if you are not white, we are supposed to stomp on you forever. That's what and I mean, making it plain. A lot of this stuff, like I said, I just didn't know. I didn't know who Tojo was. He even has that in the book of the name Tojo being used as a racist slur. That's not fiction. Philip K. Dick had a whole lot of things in that book that were true, even though it is fiction, but that did happen. He probably heard that being in San Francisco and with the Black Panther. I should have mentioned that. Philip K. Dick hanging out with the Black Panther Party in San Francisco, the man in the High Castle, but he probably heard that, especially in San Francisco, because they have Chinatown and all that. So I am sure he probably heard some non-white people. They probably didn't even have to be Japanese, you know, just whatever. Tojo. White, dominate, in charge, the man, worldwide. If you are not white, get out of here. In fact, they had that in one of the chapters in Race War in China when it was occupied by the British before World War II. I guess they had some peak where all of the really nice luxury houses were, and it was law only white people could live on the top of the hill. What did I say? That's nearly full of the man and woman in the high castle like to look down. That's exactly what Mr. Fuller says. Royalist system, and it's worldwide. Britain, the Queen, Jamaica, go down there and have some black people enslaved and all that. Just have the royals visiting Jamaica to talk all that nonsense. But looking down on non-white people all over the world, splashing mud on them, mistreating them, collecting their genitals and or teeth, and bragging about all of this. Apparently, at least according to the evidence, is that what it means to be white? That's what we have to look forward to until we solve this problem. And incidentally, that's even in The Walking Dead. I mean, you see it replicated a lot, but I mean, if you want to go current, like Walking Dead, they have the scene where Daryl would be one of the popular characters where he's going around killing zombies. Wonder who they're talking about. Killing zombies and making necklaces out of their teeth and ears. Daryl is a white man, in case you didn't know. Not that I'm encouraging anyone to watch The Walking Dead. No way. Incidentally, I guess since it was mentioned, Chris Rock, one of Gus's favorites, right, for years. I posted my report on my blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com, the report I wrote years ago about Rosa Parks, greater than Ellen DeGeneres and Chris Rock, when he said Ellen DeGeneres is like the Rosa Parks of gay rights. Are you serious? All of those compare. Someone just said they were talking about a so-called transgender individual being like Jackie Robinson. All of those comparisons, analogies, similes involving Rosa Parks, Jackie Robinson are a total disgrace, and generally they are acts of white supremacy racism, period. I said that for Chris Rock to come out and say that about Ellen DeGeneres, talking as though she is like Rosa Parks in any way, shape, form. Are you serious? Are you out of your mind? Like, what were you told to say this by white people, directly, indirectly, which happens frequently? Dr. Horne, you heard him. He said, hey, toxic masculinity and all of this. He was talking about in World War II, reports of black male homosexuality and other responses to oppression, and saying that this black male response that everyone is talking about now, the slap heard around the world, could be another example of response to oppression. I generally take the position anything that happens on television is scripted. Very few things in white entertainment, in terms of what ends up being on your screen, are off script. Very few things. The Academy Awards is one of the most long-running, annually scripted television events in the system of white supremacy with regards to entertainment. Decades and such that this has been on, that they've been doing this. I mean, really? You haven't prepared for all this? You got all these really powerful, important whites present. You haven't prepared for all this. Anybody can just get up out of their seat and walk up on stage at any time they want to. Really? I think they got security protocols. They know how to do all that. And you do have all the people here are skilled actors. That's what this is celebrating, right? Their ability to act, deceive us, make us think this is real, right? They were reporting before all this happened that no one even wanted to watch the Oscars. That's what they were saying. Not, oh, we're so excited. Is Will Smith going to win? Oh my goodness, did you see Coda? That was not the dialogue. The dialogue was, who even cares? COVID disrupted everything and all this other craziness and blue-eyed people in the Ukraine and what's going to happen and we're going to get Putin. Who even cares about the Oscars? And now everyone has to say something about and toxic black masculinity. That's another one that makes me think this might have been staged. It couldn't just be Will Smith gets an Academy Award, which, who cares? That's how I feel about it. I've seen this before, right? Denzel Washington, Halle Berry, Hattie McDaniel, really, if you want to go all the way back to World War II. I've seen this before. None of this helps us to solve white supremacy today, immediately. None of this. So I'm not, love the film, but I was not paying attention to the Oscars. I, like everyone else, was not looking forward to this, moving forward with my day until, oh my gosh, and what's going to happen? He slapped him, and oh, we got to have a peace summit, and all the rest of it. For an event where it normally would just be whoopee for Will Smith, hasn't he come a long way? Who could imagine, from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to an Academy Award, and then, no less, an Academy Award for this movie. This is not an Academy Award for playing a maid or a butler in Gone with the Wind. This is not an Academy Award for being a lackey in the Union Army, Denzel Glory. This is not an Academy Award for being a no-count rogue cop who gets brutally shot to death, Denzel again. This is not an Academy Award for bedwenching for racism. In fact, didn't we just hear sometimes you have to, didn't Dr. Horne, he said you have to prostitute yourself sometimes if you come under subjugation. This is not being rewarded celebrating that with Halle Berry, Monsters Ball. This isn't any of those. This is, oh wow, a film. Black people are speaking out against racism, white supremacy, and Will Smith getting an Academy Award for portraying a black male who has been despised universally. Like, not on par with Minister Malcolm X, but wow. Oh, are you serious? We're going to give we didn't give Will Smith an award for playing Muhammad Ali. All the characters and roles that he's had over his illustrious career, and he gets an Academy Award for playing this nigger? I'm of the opinion race soldiers, like, you read this book, if we enjoy practicing racism, white supremacy, and looking down on niggers, we're going to exalt a film that is all about displaying a affectionate black family and black people getting along and working together, minimizing conflict. Race soldiers hate that sort of thing. That's why I think this could be staged. Now we can just totally switch the attention from celebrating Will Smith's moment to no count black males. What are you going to do? If they're not raping, fighting and brawling, you just can't take them anywhere. Get Chris Rock to say something. It's not like he doesn't have a record of saying these type of anti-black things, right? What he said about Rosa Parks, I wrote about that one. Who's more racist? Isn't he lionized for that one? Who's more racist? Black people. In fact, you can hold that thought for tomorrow. Many times, victims of racism get out in public on a microphone in front of a big audience. Even at Clemson University, Dr. Horne talked about that and used that as the time to point out that black people are racist too. That's always a good line to get in when talking to white people to curry some favor. I'm not radical. I'm no Minister Malcolm. I'm no Dr. Gerald Horne. We got some racist black people too. In fact, who's more racist? Isn't that what he's known for? Victim of white supremacy, Chris Rock. Who's more racist? That one and the big piece of chicken and them two niggers got shot. Isn't that what he's known for? Mr. Fuller said that years ago. Black male, anyway, black person, period. They come out with a chair. I'm going to tell you some jokes. I immediately changed the channel. This is what I can expect. I think this may have been staged. You go, you get Chris Rock. Hey, this will be great. This will be funny. Say this, say this, say this. You stage it both ways. You tell Will Smith, like, hey, it'll be funny. It'll be great. We'll do it, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, whatever. And you can do this both ways. Like, hey, do this. Get the Academy Award. It'll be great. Nobody's even interested in watching the show. It'll drive up ratings. It'll be funny. All the rest of it. Now he's maybe looking at charges and all this. Or, hey, got this lovely family. Be a shame if something happened to Jaden. You think over whether you want to do it or not. You don't have to knock him out or anything. Just give him old love tap. And again, hey, you don't want to do it. Well, we'll talk to Jaden a little bit later. Have a good day, Will. Lots of ways. If you're in a system of domination, global domination, it's a whole lot of ways you can manipulate the conduct of non-white people. Victims. Chris Rock, victim of white supremacy, but I am no fan. Will Smith, victim of white supremacy. His wife as well, Jada Pinkett Smith, victim of white supremacy. But at the end of the day, hey, we're talking about people who are paid to act, deceive you, and make you believe things. Wow, he gave such a realistic performance. Looked like he really got hit. Looked like he really was flying there. Like, wow, did you see him in Hancock? I think this could have been staged for racist results so that we can spend all of this time talking about no count. What's our normal topic? Raping criminal, drug peddling, brawling, black privileged males. That's our favorite pastime. And particularly to detract as opposed to, wasn't Will Smith great playing that old no-count Richard Williams? Yeah, we just get back to, Will Smith is toxic black male, and Richard Williams is a toxic black male, and Chris Rock is a toxic... Everybody hates Chris. That's right. We hate all you niggers. That's my view. Master stroke from racist man, racist woman, racist child. Again, I can't emphasize enough, for an event no one wanted to watch. You should go back and do a Google search and do it. Customize the date of your search. So before that slap happened, look at the reports about the Oscars before that. It wasn't, whoopee, we're so excited. Who's going to be there? It was, be doing something else with my time and energy. We moved the time up. What's going on in Ukraine? I'm worried about this nonsense. They'll probably be protesting and Oscar so white and all the rest of it. That was real prominent. Not anymore. And again, conveniently lost in all of this, there was a great film, because normally what happens, a film wins for Best Picture, or the actor or actress wins an Academy Award. The film gets a bump, so people who didn't see it go see it, or, wow, we need to go check this out. This is amazing. Not this time. Toxic, privileged black male. That old Will Smith, he needs a good beating. So does that Chris Rock. Both of them. And see, this one, they win both ways. You can be mad at Will Smith, no count black male. See, that's what I say about you niggers. You get mad and get rid of, knock the hell out of somebody and all of it. You can go that way. Or see that old Chris Rock sitting around and talking bad about it. That's what I say about you black males, sitting around and B-word this and hope this and talking about her. You just got no respect for nobody. You especially don't expect to respect a black female. That's what I see. Win both ways. Even do a double whammy and take both positions. Win all the way around. I could be wrong. I don't have any. Actually, last comment I'll say about, I think it's repugnant to even have to talk about this, because, man, however, this is something being talked about all over the world. That's not a coincidence. That's not an accident. That's not happenstance. All over the world, that's the image. Brawling black males. Brawling black males. Gotta have white security. Is LAPD gonna charge him? That tends to lead me, but what I'm saying in terms of evidence, one, there were people that were showing like reaction shots, allegedly, of people in the crowd and what have you that were responding like, oh my God, is this real? What? Even that, people thinking, because people were saying, is this real? Was this staged? Then people were saying, wait a minute, some of these alleged reaction shots, these people weren't even present. Uh-oh. Are y'all lying and manipulating things? And then they had another report today that was saying it seems some of the images of this had been altered to try to, I guess, suggest other things that were happening and how people were responding and what unfolded. All of that. Now you got to go and manipulate and put out all these fake images to try to further manipulate how people process and think about this event. I come back to what Mr. Fuller said. You bring out a black person, male or female, and they say, hey, I'm going to tell you some jokes. I turn off the channel. Minimizing conflict with black. That's one thing I guess I'll leave on. I think all this was staged, but hey, if it had been Bill Murray, a white comedian up there telling jokes, and they had said this about Will Smith, now, would they have staged it for him to go up and whack a white man? If this is authentic, would that have happened? Now that, whew, I bet you there would have been charges then. Wouldn't have even had to ask. He might have been arrested immediately. He got up on stage and smacked Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise. I can't even mention a white. I couldn't even get that out with a straight face like a white woman. Man, they'd have been collecting and making a necklace out of Will Smith's teeth. Could be wrong. Let us see. Any other folks? Thoughts they want to get? Like I said, I find it repugnant because out of all the things happening in the world, I don't think Chris Rock is in the top 1,000. Like, are you serious? I don't care what Chris Rock said about anything. No disrespect to that victim. Nor do I think Will Smith is that important. Like, really? Reading is more important than watching television. Get Race War as opposed to talking about this nonsense. But I mean, racist white supremacists have 9 areas of activity. Entertainment is one. And wow, they got a slam dunk of black misandry and black male toxicity this week, per usual. Did any of the folks commentary they wanted to get even something repugnant about that, like hands flying up to talk about Chris Rock? We'll take, this is on a timer because I don't think this is that important, so we'll have 5 minutes if folks have any commentary on the Chris Rock segment, reading more important than watching television. Let's see. So we're on the clock, 5 minutes from now. Any of the folks that had commentary on that?
Can I get in here real quick?
Our caller in Ohio will nab other folks as well. And that the individual, each individual does not get 5 minutes. We're spending 5 minutes total on Chris Rock.
I'll make it real quick. Gus, you see the deception that they're practicing. It's mysterious enough that, wasn't it Jada Pinkett who talked about the Oscars so white a couple years ago? Again, I don't watch TV that much, but I do believe she was the one that brought it up, her and Will. And mysteriously enough, now all of a sudden Will's getting an award and he's up on stage attacking people. I sense deception. I think it was staged, but a lot of people don't actually read a lot to understand how they practice deception. They're actors. That's their job. They're paid liars. So I don't see it being any bigger than just somebody trying to deceive and using black people as a distraction. I'll mute my line.
Black males as a distraction, because this is like a very gendered tone. They had Dr. Horne, you heard him say it. He said it was toxic black masculinity. It wasn't just black people in general. It was that no good black male again. Retired firefighter in Florida, fresh off of his frolicking at Miami Beach.
Yeah, I got in too much of that saying out there, and I was caught up with the visualizing all of the twerking out of the females. But anyway, on the serious side, what is tonight's subject is really is supposed to be about?
We had Dr. Gerald Horne on. We discussed his book Race War on World War II. Tojo popped up in there. That was our guest. He was with us, and he just
must have left early.
He could only be with us for about an hour, 15 minutes or so. So he was here about 75 minutes. But he casually mentioned this incident with Chris Rock and Will. That's what I said. They get everybody in the world talking about it. He just casually mentioned it in reference to some of the things we were talking about in his book. And after we were done with that, I just gave my comments on that. But that was our assigned theme for the evening, his book, Race War, World War II, and how that was all about white supremacy, racism.
Yeah, okay. Well, that subject is not really that important to me. I did observe the so-called slap punch. It didn't look real. It looked like what you would recognize from a movie, and both parties are experienced at the fake hitting that looks real to the customer, meaning the movie watcher. It looks real, but actually when you slow it down, he was already fading away from the blow before he was hit. And I know that he's not a professional fighter who's experienced at professional fighters are experienced at what they do, and he was already fading away from it. And his reaction afterwards, it didn't look like any pain at all, let alone talking about embarrassment. Didn't look like it at all. So, and like you said, both of them are professional actors, and they've had years, decades of training. I put it that way. So I didn't see what was such of an important issue, with it. altogether. And that's all I can say. Thank you.
Much obliged. Retired firefighter in Florida. Men, 1,000% agreement. Do we have any? We're under our 5-minute time limit. So anybody else, any comments they wanted to get on Will Smith, Chris Rock?
Man, you heard?
Our caller, 2262. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Gus. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that some years ago, Will Smith was, walking a red carpet, and he ended up, smacking some white assailant who tried to sexually assault him. I'm thinking that white people are very vindictive and they hold grudges, so this could be him kind of taking that back from what he did so long ago. But that was my conjecture on it.
I've seen that footage. I think he was what they call overseas. I don't remember the exact location, so-called country, but it was not in the U.S. But I remember that. It was a report. He was in like a big crowd of people. They were interviewing him or what have you. And this male came up and tried to kiss him on the lips. Like, I guess if you're overseas, the double cheek thing. I think sometimes even males do that. But this guy tried to kiss him on the lips, and he said, kind of similar, smacked him, and I don't remember there being any oh my God, is he gonna be arrested and all the rest of it. If anything, system of racism, white supremacy, counter violence, you do have to answer to white people, so that's also something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, master deceivers, to have everyone in the known universe, or not in the known universe, but have people all over the planet talking about this event when no one wanted to watch this to begin with. Anywho,
this better be good.
With that, any other commentary folks had in? Dr. Gerald Horne, check out Race War if you have not already. Lots of great details. Hopefully folks got constructive information from that. Any other comments folks need to get in before we wrap up? Get ready for our book club tomorrow. Essie Mae Washington Williams, Dear Senator, Part 3.
Yeah, final thing I'll say, a lot of deception in regards to the Will Smith and Chris Rock incident. I think Racemen and Racewomen, they love to use Hollywood for a lot of hidden things that we are not aware of. But giving the Fresh Prince his crown in the form of the Oscar for his role as King Richard, and tacking on that tacky, trashy, and terroristic moment, I think there's meaning to that white people are definitely aware of. Definitely deception.
Absolutely. Best you can hope for is Octavia Spencer. She got an Academy Award for The Help. I don't remember any crazy antics happening to disrupt her moment. Hattie McDaniel, same thing. I don't remember any crazy antics to disrupt her moment. Halle Berry, like if you're going to come out and play the role of a maid for white people, servant, victim of some sort of sexual exploitation and rape, great, awesome. You taught us how to fry chicken, great. Awesome. We'll let you have your night, wear your best, and we will celebrate you being a victim of white supremacy. But something where you're talking about trying to combat racism, white supremacy, and calling us out as racist, and talking about how much you care about your black children, and you think your black wife is beautiful, and you want to be with her. You're not around here talking about white women and all the rest of it. You want to take care of your black children? Same type of response that you heard in the book we read from Dr. Gerald Horne. Like, I'm nauseous. In fact, that might have been motivating some of the white people saying, I don't even want to watch. Got no count niggers complaining, including his wife, Will Smith, complaining. Racism at the Oscars. Wow, black people get nominated and all the rest of it. Celebrating black. I don't even watch this. You might want to watch if it's going to be niggers brawling and we get to grouse and complain about them. Oh, okay. Well, now I'll turn back in. I'll support that. Let's check that out. Doesn't get any better than tacky. He mentioned Dr. Horne mentioned Lewis Till and his father, or Emmett Lewis Till, and then his father, Lewis Till. We just talked about Lewis Till. I have to go back. It might have been in Rethinking Rufus. I have to go back. It was one of our guests, because they noted that as well. I don't know what you want to call that, symmetry, pattern of these black males being killed and accused of being rapists, being killed as a result of some alleged contact with a white woman, some incorrect contact with a white woman. But Rethinking Rufus in the archives, I have to go back and see exactly which book and which author that was where we talked about his dad, because I didn't know that information until that program. I'd heard it before Dr. Horne mentioned it today, but that's not, I think Dr. Horne, as he was saying, that's not common knowledge. I guess in many of the films and books where they talk about Emmett Till, for whatever reason, they don't mention that. I don't know why. Not popular, what have you. Lots of bleeping back males to think about. Anywho, everybody got their final comments, what they needed to say? Awesome. We should. I was too early.
I was thinking about the monkey meat, and how white people were calling the Japanese go out and get some monkey meat. And I suspect there was some cannibalism going on that, and I also suspect there was some necrophilia going on during that time that was not that reported. If it was reported, it's hard to acquire this document. Again, I say this to for people to detect and be aware of the behavior patterns that we could see white people participating in, and we should want to understand that and correct that, change that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That all of it. The monkey meat, delectable Negro. I read that passage from Dr. Horne's book, and he was talking about it was, kill Jap, kill Jap, kill Jap, and get out and get some more monkey meat. I am saying he has the passage in the book, Dr. Horne does, where white people were practicing cannibalism. Maybe I'll read that one real quick before. Let's see how quickly I can locate it. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Not long after the internment, the already horrible conditions in the devastated city declined sharply. He's talking about the internment of white people after the Japanese defeated the British in China. Beyond the barriers of the camps, there were credible reports of cannibalism, or so alleged. I.D. Zia, who hailed from Shanghai, but who was educated as a physician in Hong Kong, our neighbor housewife, he recalled chillingly disclosed that the distinction between human flesh and animal meat lay in the fact that human flesh, when cooked in a frying pan, would bounce up, whereas animal meat would not. Inside Stanley, this is a internment camp, one mother overheard two middle-aged men discussing which of the little ones they would start on if the Japanese stopped sending rations to us. The interned Jean Gittins reports that by 1944, it was said that human meat was being sold openly in markets. Footnote 35. When a large mongrel stray dog strayed into the camp, two English soldiers decided to kill the cur, boil him, and eat him after dark. Robert Hammond saw one lady so hungry that she ran out and picked up a large rat that had just been thrown away and started to eat it, skin and all. With astonishment, he saw a man selling lo shi tong rat soup for 10 cents a bowl. A U.S. sailor interned at Stanley recalled that no meat ever tasted as good as the horse meat I ate there. They also ate weevils, since the doctors in the camp told us they contained vitamins. Now this is white people talking about even eating other white people if they don't get rations, and then collecting teeth and all the rest. What does it mean to be white. And imagine that. Things have gotten to the point where human meat is being sold in open markets. Context of White Supremacy. A Delectable Negro Book Club 2017. Seasoning. Lots of things to think about with white culture and seeing these type of behavior patterns pop up repeatedly. Anywho, another reason to read is he was saying, Dr. Horne was saying that a lot of this is buried, this information you would have to read in order to access this content. So, again, reading. I don't know about watching Everybody Hates Chris, but reading more important than watching television. Everyone satisfied? We didn't miss anybody?
Hey, Gus.
Yes, sir.
What's interesting about that, the cannibalism side, there's a movie, the movie's called Ravenous. Is like a science fiction. I don't know if it's sci-fi, but I believe it's on Netflix. And I'd seen this movie back in the day. What it was about is the expansion westward in America, and I guess the 1800s. Long story short, the movie revolved around this cannibal who was running around killing people and eating them. And in the last scene in the movie, like this person who was a soldier, I guess, in the Union Army and whatnot, he became a cannibal because he ended up getting in a position where he was in like a valley or a ravine or something like that, and he had to eat somebody, and the other cannibal came back and got him. So these two cannibals are sitting here fighting each other through this camp that's filled with like pretty much body parts. There's a big pot that's like a stew pot, and it's got arm bones in it. You know what I'm saying? If you watch the movie, you'll get what I'm saying about it. But it's a whole movie just about the cannibalism side. And what the guy said in the movie, he was speaking about like cannibalizing people, but also how America was cannibalizing people as it expanded out west. I guess the reference to eating people physically and you know, taking over people's territory and enslaving them. It's a very interesting movie, but if you get a chance, the movie's name is Ravenous. I'll mute my line now.
White people do reveal some truth in their movies, fiction, as they say. The Man in the High Castle, but Ravenous, if folks want to check it out. In fact, Denzel Washington, wasn't he in the Book of Eli? Where he had to be like, well, we got to get the heck out of here. These folks are eating people. They were going to eat him too. I was in the Book of Denzel. Why? He was Peacemaker. Did we miss any other folks that had a hand up that we missed totally? Do y'all have commentary that you need to get in?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I think whites have already, I think for decades, they've already begun the process of having everyone basically to become, I guess, in a way, indirect cannibals, given that the human stem cells are in a lot of our foods, which is why I like how you always, talk about, eating healthy and, organic foods, etc. And also, too, as I'm sure a lot of us know, human stem cells are in a lot of the vaccines. But can I make one just brief comment about the Chris Rock? It's actually a correlation with another matter. Is that okay?
I reckon.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. So I thought, my view of that is I agree with you that I believe that it was staged, but I also believe that the whites created that as a distraction from the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearings, because Twitter was abuzz about how calm she was, very composed, even though the senators, the white senators, were very aggressive towards her and their questioning. And for the most part, from what I witnessed, her responses were just, very highly, intelligent. And again, she was just very composed. And so I just thought of that they created that distraction because everyone was just, raving about how, well composed she was. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Much obliged. That is happening right now. In fact, I'll have to ponder that. Let me look at the news and see, because people have been talking about that a lot over. I have to process it some more, but my thought with that took a turn for Black misandry as well. They have been on Clarence Thomas's wife. Man, she needs to come to his wife is white, so that's cowbell too, but she needs to come down here and testify. What is she doing about January 6th and all of that? And old Clarence Thomas needs to recuse himself from anything related to January 6th. Like, that's been huge in the midst of all this. And I was like, wow, Clarence Thomas was just in the hospital. Like, he, had some major health problems. Nobody cares. No count black male, Coons, got this white wife and everything. They've been talking about all that. Like, dang, the whole Supreme Court process, like, they have been talking about her. Is she going to be confirmed or not? And it bringing back up Clarence Thomas and all that from Anita Hill, toxic black masculinity again, and he shouldn't be there, blah, blah, blah. Now he needs to recuse himself. Like, that has been kind of interesting as well, all at the same time. I have to process it some more. I could be totally in the air, but that is kind of all concurrent. Will Smith, Chris Rock thing, confirmation for Ketanji Brown Jackson, and then that no count Clarence Thomas, who was just in the hospital. Like I said, he could be dying or what have you. No count Clarence Thomas. He needs to step down, recuse himself, maybe even step down, and his wife needs to get in here and explain herself. Cowbell. I'm just checking to see the New York. Oh, they got to sign, of course. They delayed the vote. Yeah, that's. Oh, and they got Emmett Till on the front page for the. All I can say with the lynching, the same thing that I said last week. They got the bill passed now. The way that they define lynching, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they start convicting black males of lynching. Emmett, Will Smith, anybody else, the way that they defined it, just like with hate crimes. But that's, we'll have to see how that goes. I'm looking at the New York Times. I do not see Ketanji Brown Jackson mentioned. Now, they did delay the vote, so I suspect that might be some of it. But I do see on the front page of the New York Times Chris Rock and Will Smith. That would support her point. But they delayed the vote, so we'll have to see. But yeah, let's see we'll check one more. Let's see. LA Times, what's on their front page? Let's see. This is LA, so it's got to be Will Smith and Chris Rock. Let's see. Yep, there it is, Will Smith. Let's see. Anything about Ketanji Brown Jackson? Let's see. Nope. Nope. Two things on. Got two on that and nothing on Ketanji Brown Jackson. Not that I think that's anything to celebrate either. I thought the same thing when they had Clarence Thomas. They could put my mom on the Supreme Court, and I would say the same thing. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Anything else folks need to get in? Everybody satisfied? We will assume folks are good. While we're wrapping up, I'm just checking the Chicago Tribune just for giggles. Will Smith and Chris Rock. Chicago Tribune. Anything for Ketanji Brown Jackson? Two things for Chris Rock and Will. Are you serious? All the things happening in the world, like that's that important, even in Chicago? Are you serious? Alrighty. Two on Will Smith And Chris Rock 0 on Ketanji Brown Jackson for today. Oh, oops, missed it. There's one. Sorry, they had it on the side. Sorry, they do have one for Ketanji Brown Jackson, that she will get 1 GOP vote. I did see that earlier today, that she's going to get 1 GOP vote, but all that's been delayed. So, that's kind of on the back burner for now. We'll have to spend another couple of days talking about Chris Rock and Will Smith. Much obliged for everyone tuning in. Hope it was worthy of your time and energy. Broadcast should be in the archives directly. I think we had a problem. Our Black Talk Radio Network updated the site, and they upgraded the live stream, right? That goes out to like TuneIn and other locations. The white people have to switch that feed, so hopefully it'll be switched soon, so that if you listen via TuneIn Live or what have you, you'll be able to continue doing that. I'm going to submit it to them again. Mr. Reed already made 1 submission, so I'll try again and see if that expedites the process, so that they'll hurry up and update the feed, and we'll be good, so you can listen live online. But the archive should be working. If you have problems accessing the archived content, let me know. untiljustice@gmail.com. 13 years listener-supported counter-racist radio, where we've had content like Rethinking Rufus, Thomas A. Foster, mentioned on today's broadcast, and The Delectable Negro, Top 10 for Gus T. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button is in the top right corner. You'll see the links for PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. Cash App address is cash.app/$the cows. Much obliged for all the folks who have kept us broadcasting over a decade. Over a dozen years. Hopefully worthy of folks' time and energy. With that, sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. We need high-functioning brain computers to resolve this problem ASAP, urgently. If you're out and about, this is not a time for confrontations with strangers. Dylan Storm Roof. If you didn't leave your residence, prepare to kill and or die. Exit. That is the protocol. You have no idea if they have an armed entourage at the ready, and you're out with your groceries. If you're in a vehicle, you are sober, buckled up, not on your cell phone, just doing the small things that we can to minimize contact with race soldiers, and we need all of our attention so we can be mindful about things that are happening around us. All of that said, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling, no gossiping, minimizing conflict with other black people. That's when someone mentioned the program with Charles Cobb before. Non-violence. Black people, non-white people being non-violent with each other. We don't have a Chris Rock situation to talk about, because black people are non-violent with other black people. Counter-racism code would help us solve this problem immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.